Hello and welcome to Casual Leaves. So today we will be talking about some common houseplant frustrations, and I have a whole list here on my laptop. But what we will be doing today is we will be talking about them in detail, and we will be talking about the possible solutions. We will be possibly discussing how some of them don't have solutions and how you need to still go through them. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I think it's going to be a very interesting video. I may do this in a couple of parts, as I may not be able to shoot the whole thing together, but that's the aim. And I'm so happy with my new plant shelf setup. If you have not seen that video, please do check it out. And before we proceed, if you're new here, welcome so much. I make houseplant videos and sometimes interesting review and unboxing videos, so do check them out and do subscribe to the channel. And if you're returning here, thank you so much to come back one more time. It means a lot. So the very first one is overwatering and underwatering. And the minute I think I talk about houseplant frustrations, that's the first one that we all think of. Specifically because it's a hard one. Now we all have read various guidelines about how to water our houseplants, and specifically some of the rare and indoor tropical plants. And most of them talk about the fact that you need to water them when they are at least the soil is 2 inches dry from the top. But still, how does it not work? I don't know if that happens with you or not, but that leads to overwatering or underwatering so many times, especially because each plant behaves so differently. So while you may be reading about how to water your philodendrons, your alocasias, your pothos, syngoniums, whatever, whichever plant you may be reading upon, they will typically have the same set of guidelines that when the top 1-2 inches of the soil is dry, water it then. However, you may have seen that it doesn't really work. So why is that so? Now that can be because of various factors. Each plant, the size of it, the way the soil mixes, the way the soil moisture is, the location of the plant in your house, whether there is a wind draft or not, how much light it's getting or not, how big the plant is, how many leaves does it have, and every plant will still behave differently. So if you have a really big plant, it may use the water it has in the soil differently, whereas a smaller plant. So the guide here is that you need to individually check each and every plant. That is what I have learned over time. You need to learn about the patterns of how quickly the plants dry or don't dry in specific corners of your house. So for example, the plants on the top of the shelf, they dry maybe quicker because they're closer to the fan above, or the plants at the bottom dry up a bit later in a couple of days. So you need to keep a watch, and you need to try and still set a routine, because if you will not set a routine, you will be really frustrated taking care of the watering schedules. And just in order to avoid the frustrations, people end up overwatering because they would rather feel that I should not let my plant dry up. But I think a tip here would be to still try and be an underwaterer, because you can still save your plant than a plant which is overwatered, because that is a very difficult place to come back from. So overall, yes, there is no specific single guideline than to spend time over days and weeks with the kind of plants you have, and the ones which have a similar routine, you create your routine around watering them. That seems to help a lot. So one more thing I want to talk about when we're talking about watering is the pot drainage. You need to be very sure about the kind of drainage you have in your pots, whether they have it, don't have it, whether you have made it yourself or they came when you bought the planter. So make sure that there is enough drainage in all types of plants. Of course, this changes for plants which have a different type of a soil mix, which is like pon or sphagnum moss related plants, or then you have your leca and other kind of mixes. So just be very careful about the pot drainage system that you're going for. It will even work if you're going for self-watering planters. They are very easy if you're someone who doesn't want to take the plants to the sink and water them, because most house plants require that when the top few inches of the soil has dried up, 1 to 2 inches of the soil has dried up, they need to be taken to the sink preferably, and you give them a good rinse with water, let the soil dry up a bit in a way that all the extra water has come out, and then you place the plant back. Now if you can't do that, I would really advise that you use some self-watering planters. Sorry, but I had to move to another place to do the rest of this video. So moving on to the second point, which is of pest infestations. And honestly, this one is again very, very tricky because you think nothing is going to happen until it happens. So you need a battle plan for your pests, and you need to know how the pests work, what type of pests are there, and if you think that it's not going to happen to you, well, it may not for a couple of while, but at some point it may. And usually in my experience, I have seen that this happens when you get a new plant. And what I mean is that when a new plant comes from the other nurseries or other gardens or online stores, they come from an external environment and they carry a lot of pests with them. So it's very important to isolate. That is one lesson that I have learned over time. You need to isolate your plants. I didn't used to do that before, but I've started doing that because recently I got plants which had thrips on them, and I didn't know about thrips. It took me a while to know about them, how they function, and overall what kind of solutions can be created for them. And so yes, it's very important that when you buy a new plant, you keep it away at least for a couple of weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks, so that any cycle of a plant which may have been there before it got to you, because they may have cleaned the plant before selling it, but there could be eggs of previous pests on them which will come alive in a couple of weeks. So it's advised that you keep using solutions, gentle solutions, when you get a new plant. So what I do is I have created a diluted neem oil solution spray mix, which is what I use on any new plants. And I have also created a spider mites solution, and I will link it below because it really works, and I did a lot of research before making that. So I think that's a good one. I would advise everyone to use that. And I spray my plants at least twice a week with both of these. So every time I take my plant to water them into the sink or the bathroom sink, I use the spray as well. And there are some watch outs, of course, with any pest solution that you may use, whether it's over the counter or bought online or from a nursery store. You need to test it. You cannot just go ahead and put it on all of your plants, because that's going to be a big damage if it doesn't work for you or for your plants. And every house is different, so every house plant condition is different. You need to be careful about how the sunlight hits your plant, because if you've sprayed it with solutions and the sunlight hits the plant, it's going to burn the leaves. That's the most common problem when you're using such solutions, so please do watch out for that. Now, if you do not have any pests, that doesn't mean you're through as well, because you need to keep your plants clean. You need to every 2 to 3 weeks, you need to clean the dust off the leaves, especially when you have big leaf kind of plants like big monsteras or big leaf anthuriums or other philodendrons, or even hoyas which have twisty leaves like a Hindu rope. A lot of dust sits in them, and that causes new pests to take birth. So it's very important that you keep it clean from before in order to avoid pests. Now, the other thing that is important with pests is a clean surface area, because a lot of time these pests may be in the air, or they could come on you when you're traveling outside your home and you come back home. You could be carrying them, and it could be from anywhere else that it has just arrived on your surface where you keep the plants. So the shelves, like here for example, or the side area where I keep my plants, or the plant shelf, or even your IKEA cabinets, it's very important to clean the surface, because most of the times existing pests might fall on them. Pests from wind drafts may come and settle there, and you need to wipe it clean. Otherwise, you will keep wondering from where they are coming, but it's actually the surface. The next one I want to talk about is the light situation. So a lot of our apartments or houses that we have may not have the correct amount of sunlight that the plants need. And of course, not all plants, specifically if you have a lot of plants in your houseplant collection, which could be more than 30, 50, 100, 200 kind of plants, not all of them can get that right perfect spot, for which you should really not worry, because we do have a lot of grow lights these days. There are cheap ones, there are expensive ones, but they are there, they are available. I have personally created a space for it in my bathrooms, where I keep certain plants when I'm trying to isolate them or see how they do when they're by themselves till they have grown to a specific point. Or I have installed clamp grow lights, like one here, even though there's a window right here, but that doesn't get all the light that I need for my plants all throughout the day. I do have clamp lights installed for my plant shelf and things like those. So you will not really get all kind of spots in your home. And to be honest, we all talk about how indoor plants don't need much light, sunlight, they need indirect light. But I had a huge problem believing that, and I would still think that if I place them in a brighter spot than just a bright spot, they would grow faster. But it turned out it's not so. In fact, a lot of my plants, which were kept directly under the grow light or right next to the windowsill, weren't really doing well until I actually moved them under a shade. So, for example, there's this little shade here, and I've kept my black velvet there, and it suddenly started doing so well. Same was with my holiday cactus, which needs a little darkness at night. So, you have to really believe the fact that they do need less light, and it's not that if you place a lot of light on them, they're going to do better. You have to watch it out though. There are a lot of plants which can do better in individual cases. They will even take direct sunlight hitting them. So you have to spend time on your plants, but be very careful not to change their positions too often, because plants hate that. I believe, especially monsteras don't like it if you change their spots too often. So take your time. Eventually you will learn what's the right spot for your plants in the house. The other thing that we need to keep in mind about pests is that if you do have an infected plant, you need to again isolate it. We also need to think about the fact that whether we need to throw away the entire plant, which can happen if you were maybe away, you were traveling, and the pest infestation is so high that you can't really save the plant. And in that case, it is fine. You can discard the entire plant before it spreads to your entire collection. However, there are situations where it's only a part of the plant or a couple of leaves, and the leaves which are completely damaged, just discard them, do away with them, because we can't see it. But which is another thing that you need to have, ideally some tools like a microscope to see how bad the infestation is. But even if you don't have that, if you can visibly see that the damage is a lot on a particular leaf, chop it off. If you think it's worth saving, if it's a very expensive plant, and at times we have spent years on maturing a specific plant and we can't just throw it away or chop it off, in that case the least you can do is isolate it and treat it every day. And every day may not be the same kind of treatment, but maybe one day you can clean the leaves with just a cloth, kind of a damp cloth. The other day you can do a neem oil solution. The next day you can do a spidermites solution or a soap solution, and so on and so forth. So try to look at the plant very closely after the infestation has happened. If you don't know much about it, there are so many resources, but it is so easy to get confused. And that's why I wanted to just mention that these three things, simple things, the three simple solutions that we have, do work on most kinds of pests. It's just that the duration for which you need to carry them out could be different. And the best thing is to, of course, educate yourself. So if you go and read about mealybugs or thrips or spider mites or other types of infestations which happen for house plants, that would definitely be a good read. It's a good investment to save your expensive plants. So this leads to my next point of frustration, which is finding the right spot for your plants. Don't be afraid to play around with your plants. Invest in good plant shelves and cabinets. You can go for floating shelves like these from Amazon or the IKEA ones. Do invest in that, because you can use a lot of space, and it's important that it looks nice and aesthetic, because at a point back in time I used to just put all my plants all together, and that just caused a lot of problem. So they do better when they have their own spot. They're not really touching each other, because that creates a concern of passing on diseases between plants. Even root rot can pass through fungus gnats between plants and things like those, because the spores are there in the air and you don't want that. So it's important that you find the right spot. for each of your plants. Some of the plants look really nice in the bathroom, some of the trailing plants look nice in the bathroom, some monsteras look good, like Adansonia looks good in a kitchen, or certain plants can really help you hide certain wiring and things like those. So do play around with that. Don't feel frustrated that you need to keep the plant in a specific spot because it's doing really well there. Try to experiment once it has started thriving, that is. When you bring a new plant home, it will take time to adjust. It's not your fault if it's not doing so well as it was doing in the nursery or the garden, but it will adjust when you give it the right conditions. And once it has started pushing out at least new 4-5 leaves, that's when you can try and move it around. So the next point is about the changing seasons, and this is a really big frustration when you deal with it the first time. So I started this whole houseplant collection a year and a half back, and now because I've completed one full cycle of the year, I know how weather affects the plants, especially alocasias. In winter, though we may not have the kind of winter that other places have, and everyone's winter will be different, but there is a change in the weather, in the climate, and that will show effects in your plants. So don't be afraid if plants start behaving differently. Just observe. You can read about it and you should read about it, but what may happen to your plants could be very different. For my alocasias, the leaves, they start curling up in the winter, or certain temperature dependent plants like Perezo Verde or your Syndapsis tribui moonlight, they may change colors of the leaves and things like those, or plants may go dormant. So just read upon that. It's not really a big issue. It's something you can deal with if you are educated with your plants, and just let your plants be. Just continue your routine, water them, give them the right lighting, the right food they need, and at times just let them be and they should be fine. So hello again. As clearly you can tell, this is part 2 of the video, so I'm shooting this bit on a separate day. So there are 5 more things I want to talk about, which are next 5 frustrations as we've been talking for the theme of this video. Now the next one is unpredictable plant growth. This one is, I think, the most frustrating for most of us most of the times. It's not something that will come and go. It happens too often, and hence it can be really frustrating. It can make you feel really bad about your plant collection and things like those. But I just want to talk about it and how we can deal with it. So of course there are a lot of plants which do really well when you have brought it right, from the plant store, and it's looking really good. They have settled in your house now, but still there is no growth, and you try everything and there's just no growth, and it can be very, very disappointing, depressing, and frustrating. I have a few examples here which I want to talk about. The first one is my Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. I actually have 2 plants in here, and they were really big plants when I got them, but unfortunately they didn't really do well. They didn't do anything for a while, and I tried to take cuttings and I water propagated it. It had brilliant roots. I do have a video on that, and I planted it in the most perfect soil, which is this aeroid soil, and of course you can see the roots there, but there is no growth. I've tried everything. Just a few days back, it has started giving me a new shoot here, which you can see, but it took a very, very long time. And even now, there is this other plant. This is a second plant, and that's the other one. In this one, there's just no growth. I can see some leaf developing, but it doesn't do anything. So you have to be prepared about these things, that plants will act the way they wish to. We can be patient with them, is all we can do. The other one here is my most favorite, Alocasia Black Velvet. This plant has been really having a story. This is the first ever rare plant I got after the String of Hearts, which also I'll come to. It never survives for me. No succulents survive for me, actually. So this plant came in as the most healthy, most perfect, most beautiful plant ever, until I, of course, damaged it with overfeeding, I believe, and I didn't know watering back then. But later on, I really struggled a lot. This came down just a little offshoot with nothing in it, and I was patient with it, and this is the newest leaf which it has given me. It is still hardening up. It is still becoming more and more dark, which is a feature for black velvet. So what I want to say is that plants will behave the way they want to, and we may not really know the reasons. We can try things and eventually it does get better. So you just have to be prepared for it. It shouldn't make us feel really bad about our collection. Because this is nature, it's natural, this happens. And that's why I really have been trying to buy matured plants. While they may cost a bit more, but at least you have a good place to start with. Like my string of hearts here, I'll try and insert a close-up of it. This is my fourth or fifth string of hearts, and I have a video on this as well, and I've covered it. It was the most healthy, proper plant. It was growing as well until one fine day, all the growth went away. One of the plants died. The other one is about to die off. So that's how it is with plants at times, and it can be really frustrating, but just be patient with it is all I can say. One more point I wanted to cover was, for example, a pothos. So that's my Marble Queen pothos. Now the problem with this one was I bought a very big full pot, which was actually decently priced, and I got it and it had the most perfect colors on it. But the minute it came to my home, the kind of lighting it gets, I just can't replicate that color. Not that it's not beautiful at all. It's lovely, it's great, it grows, it's fine, it's bushy, it's perfect, but the colors do change when they are in your environment. So these are just small things we need to be knowing about. Then the next one is buying unhealthy plants. This was, I think, the biggest frustration I faced. For the longest time, I really didn't have good places from where I could buy good quality plants. So I just want to say something. If a plant is not doing too well, it's not you, it's the plant probably, because there are a lot of sellers who will show a big looking plant but with node roots in them, but they are not going to get established too soon. And if you're not an expert, you're going to face a lot of issues with it. So make sure that you have some good quality sellers, and don't just order from one website at one go or from one seller at one go. Try and experiment, try to go about a bit, see different local stores, make sure the seller is trustworthy, and you can actually get disturbed all the time with notifications. But yeah, so I was trying to say that make sure that you can trust your seller. That is very, very important, because when you're paying an amount for a plant, at times that can be expensive. You should at least get what that money deserves. So yes, make sure that you're buying healthy plants, and watch out for some signs when you're making the purchase. Try to ask for a picture of the plant, if the roots can be shown, or how mature it is, and making sure that the plant they are sending you is the one they showed you in the picture. This happens a lot. I have paid for a full matured Clarinervium, but I got a baby juvenile Clarinervium. Similarly with other plants, like I remember it so clearly, and even honestly after seeing the picture, other plants arrive, right? Like a different quality of the plant arrives than what we see. So those are a few things which can get really frustrating. The next point is the limited availability of rare plants. So here, of course, I talk a bit about social media, because we see a lot of rare plants and it's like a rabbit hole. You want all of them, but you really don't find them, because specifically in every country, there are only certain plants which are easily available, and then the rare portion goes down really soon. Everybody ends up having the same set of plants. So it's quite a difficult task to create a rare collection of your own. My advice here would be that if you're finding a rare plant at a specific price point, just take it, keep it, because if we just follow the trending plants for that particular moment or that year, you may firstly not find it, and that can be very frustrating. There are so many wishlist plants like Anthurium pallidiflorum that I've been wanting since 1.5 years, and I haven't got it, and I keep feeling that I'm spending on other plants while I want that one. Or even basic plants like Anthurium forgetii, you just not find it so easily. Or there are so many other plants that we all want, the rare plants, but we don't really find them, and that can be quite frustrating. It's also important to talk about the fact that it is a seller's market. Specifically in our country, there are a lot of cities where these rare plants are actually quite available, but because of courier issues or transit issues, the costs tend up to go very high, or they're not even willing to sell them. There are a lot of Facebook groups where a lot of people, try to say they have rare plants, but in the end, you just end up spending a lot of money and not getting enough value. So it's very important to understand the market situation where you are at. So it may be fine that you try to source plants which are rare in your location and kind of be satisfied with that, because so many plants which are so popularly rare in Indonesia or US or Canada, which the rest of the globe doesn't really get, and that can be quite frustrating. The last one is time and patience, and this also is one of the most frustrating thing. Again, social media is a bit to be blamed. Here I want to talk about the big leaves on plants, right? So you see all these plants which have really huge leaves, and it looks to us that these plants come this way, or the next leaf when it grows, when we buy the plant, is going to be that big. That's not going to happen. It takes a lot of time for a plant to mature to give those big kind of leaves. I have seen it a lot in local groups, WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, where people have tried everything. They've got the right moss pores, they've got the right soil mix, and they all do everything required, but they'll share pictures. Hey, I've done this, I've done that. I'm expecting the leaf to be, in big size now, but that doesn't happen. It takes time. And I have dealt with this myself. I've been trying since 1.5 years, and maybe it's the conditions of where I live that it takes more time, but honestly, don't get too bogged down if your next new leaf is not how we expect it to be, like a big, immaculate, perfect leaf. That takes time. I do have an example here of my anthurium, which I want to show. Okay, also a new update. This is the biggest leaf ever on this plant, and it's too heavy. Just want to let the cam focus on it. So that is the biggest leaf on this plant. It is still growing. It is still hardening up. I do expect it to expand more. This used to be one of the bigger leaves, but even this has now been superseded by this one. And this used to be the biggest leaf before that, and now it's not. So there's a point I want to make after I keep this down. So when I got this plant, I was so excited because I'm like, hey, the first anthurium foliage plant, and because it had not picked up here rare plants and foliage plants and things like those, and I was so excited to get this plant. And it came with a decently sized leaf, like just this much, and I was so happy. But then I'm like, when do I get big leaves like those? And I'm doing everything, and honestly, it's just time. It takes time for the plant to develop, mature, and be happy, and us being happy with them. Like, I think the plants know whether we are happy or not with them. But yeah, it takes time and a lot of patience. I have tried to maintain schedules, the things I put in the water, when I repot it, all those things, they play a huge role. Lighting plays the maximum amount of role, to be very honest. Even if it's indirect light, it's not simple. So that is something that we all need to be mindful of. I have one more example which I want to show. So I'm even scared to pick up this plant because it's got thrips. That's my Thai constellation 1, Thai constellation 2. Now, when I got this plant, the seller, a very popular seller in fact, they sold it on 84% off sort of a deal, and I immediately, of course, jumped at it. But it came with thrips, it came as a damaged plant, and I was very upset. And it took maybe 2 months for them to replace my plant. This is the replaced plant, which also had thrips. So maybe that entire batch had thrips, and maybe that's why it was on discount. And those are some of the things we deal with, and I was patient with it, treating it for thrips. That exercises the most amount of patience, to be honest, and time, because it can take months for it to go away completely, and it may damage the rest of your plant, so the risk is very high. This plant was the original one. This had a new leaf which I broke. I broke a brand new leaf while watering it and treating it for thrips. So I'm really sad about that, but it happens. So again, time and patience, a new leaf will come back. Also want to show my peperomia, watermelon peperomia. You can see how bad it is right now, and I have featured this plant before in my videos. This was a big bushy watermelon peperomia, one of the most beautiful plants I had, I would say, until for no fine reason, because everything seemed perfect, it gave itself to root rot, and I could just not see any signs of it. I mean, I could, but I didn't know it would be that. So I was taking my time to react, and the plant was completely eaten away by root rot. There was nothing left. And one fine day, I was trying to water propagate it, and then I saw that there is mosquito larvae in it, and I used hydrogen peroxide, and the whole plant died on me again. And this is what is left of it now. So this happens for, the growth plans we may have of a plant. And honestly, the whole root rot situation I had really, really made me depressed. It was making me feel unwell to that point, and that is not what should happen. So these are just frustrations. You should just deal with it that way and let it go, is what I would advise. And I think just buying matured, healthy plants is the key here. That is what we all should aim for. So that's it for this video. The point here was that with a little bit of knowledge and conversation, it can actually be a fun, exciting experience with houseplants and rare plants, tropical plants. Don't feel too overwhelmed, though I know you will, but try not to let it take over you. These are amazing plants to have. They give a lot of joy, a lot of beauty, a lot of happiness, and I hope that you have solutions to fight these frustrations. And if you do leave them down in the comments below and we could chat on it. And thank you so much for watching this video till the end. If you did, please do like and subscribe to the channel. And if you can, do me a favor, watch the next video. Bye.